So, introduction's done. Thank you again, Pusher, for hosting us here and JS Monthly. So, I'm here to talk about SvelteKit. Who here uses SvelteKit on a daily basis in production? Who here uses SvelteKit for fun? Okay. Who has no idea what SvelteKit is and what I'm talking about? Cool. Good. So, a lot of the slides are going to make sense now. That's good, good, good. Okay, so I've called this SvelteKit Unpacked. I was going to call it SvelteKit Unpacked, Understanding the Magic Behind Data Loading, but it's a bit of a mouthful, so I just went with SvelteKit Unpacked, but we are going to be talking about the magic behind data loading. And I'll come on to why I'm bothering to put this up here shortly, but we need to do primers first and introductions, obviously. So my name's Scott. I organised the Svelte London meetup along with Akash, who's here, and the founder, and a couple of other people as well. So we do it on a monthly basis. Next one is in June. If you want to know more about Svelte and how it's used day to day in real world examples, then I suggest you come along. I do a lot of workshops on getting familiar with Svelte and using SvelteKit. I've been using Svelte now since 2021, April 2021. And before that, I was full on React, love React. And it was the best thing ever until I tried Svelte. And hopefully, when I show you, like, we're going to go through some primer slides on how to use it and the general synopsis of what Svelte is. I hope you'll agree as well. So also, I'm a developer relations engineer. I work for a SaaS company called Storyblock. They're a headless CMS company. I'm a dad, and my slides haven't updated. I'm also a cat dad, and getting quite worried now because I put in some extra slides. But I'm not going to show you pictures of my family because, for obvious OPSEC reasons, but I'm going to show you my cats and my slides for my holiday. No, I'm not. This is Boris, Leo and Darcy. Those three cats we've had for nearly 10 years now. And we've recently adopted, well, not adopted, we've got another two cats. That's Barney and that is Jade. And they are adorable, look at them. Just look at them cats, they are, oh. And Barney, he decided to come and help me when I was doing the slides on the weekend. So they're adorable. I'm hoping that's enough of an icebreaker for us to get started on talking about other things. A quick plug. I've already said the next one for Svelte Society London is June 21st. You can find us on Guild. Meet up every now and then, we post stuff on there. Anyway, understanding the magic behind data loading in SvelteKit. So before I do this, we need to talk about what Svelte is. So Svelte, it's a component framework, much like React and Vue, but it doesn't have a virtual DOM, so there's no DOM diffing. What gets shipped to the browser is HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. It's a compiler, so it compiles your code up front, and that's what gets shipped to the browser. ESM modules for JavaScript and HTML, CSS along the way as well. It's not as new as you might think. The V1 release of Svelte was in November 2016. There's been a lot of changes since then. We're coming up to V4. V3 was the big release with Reactivity, which I'll be talking about shortly. What is a framework? Framework allows you to write a declarative code. So declarative code means you're telling the browser what you want the outcome to be rather than precise instructions. So let's take a quick look, my clicker, at what that means. So imperative code versus declarative. So with imperative code, we've got a really badly named component here for this function. This is just a button which is going to increment a count. So our count variable is defined here. We need to tell the browser we want a button, so we're going to create an element for a button, and then we're going to add in some text content for that to show the number of clicks on that button. We also need to tell the browser that it needs to listen to an event on that button. When it's clicked, we want to increment our count by 1 and display that in the text on the button. Then we're going to return that. So declaratively, that's fine, but once it gets larger and you have to manage more stuff, it can get really messy. So let's look at this in a declarative fashion. So first up, I'm going to show you how you do this in Svelte. So in Svelte, I'll come on to the anatomy of a Svelte file, but we are defining our variable here. And then we are defining a button in some markup. And we're using the onClick handler here to increment our count inline. And then we're going to update the text of that button. Same with React. Everyone's done this. I didn't ask for a show of hands on React, Vue, Svelte. So how many people use React? Everyone? How many people use Vue? Right, okay. So you're familiar with this then. We're using setState here. And we're going to increment our count with the set count. You might notice there's no parenthesis around the return here. I don't know why I did that actually, to be honest with you. But you can just put it on one line. So you've got less code, but obviously it takes up all of your code editor. But you can also do the same with Svelte. So you could probably see you write a bit less code with Svelte. It's a lot more concise. And to me, a lot more simpler as well. So here we've got that same button in React and Svelte. So the sort of common takeaway is that you write a lot less code in Svelte than you do with React. So this is just an example. I've heard you write up to about 40% less code with Svelte over React. But I also hear that 99% of statistics are made up on the spot. So, you know, take that with a pinch of salt, but you can see it's a lot nicer to read and a lot less overhead. Obviously, we could put in some fragments here and, you know, there's still divs. You still need to wrap it in something. Anyway, we're here to talk about the magic behind data loading in Svelte. But before that, let's do some Svelte basics. Sorry, I think I'm hilarious, so I'm glad you don't. Right, so Svelte basics. It's let's just go through these. It's a HTML superset. We'll take a look at styling, reactivity, component props, and logic. So Svelte is a HTML superset. So that means anything which is valid in the HTML spec is valid in Svelte. So a H1 here is just going to get rendered out as a H1 tag. This is a .svelte file. Basic anatomy of a Svelte file is you'd have your script tag at the top, any markup in the middle, and your style tags at the bottom. There was a time a while back where the script and the style would be done first and the markup would be done afterwards. This is like the sort of settled upon method now for structuring it, and that's what Prettier tells me. It's going to organize it that way, so I'll just go with what Prettier says. So styling. All the styles in a Svelte file are scoped to that file or component, let's say. They're given a unique hash, so that means it doesn't bleed into your global styles, so there's no interference between anything else which would be in that page, let's say. So this is how you do style in a simple Svelte component. Let's talk about reactivity in Svelte. So there's an awesome talk by Rich Harris. Rich Harris is the inventor of Svelte. He came up with Svelte a while back now. If you search Rethinking Reactivity on YouTube, there's a great talk where Rich will go into great detail on this. This is just going to be a high-level overview. So if you want a variable to be changed when another variable is changed, you would do that with this $colon here. So we're defining this $colon doubled variable. And this is going to equals count times 2. So that means anytime count changes, doubled will then change as well. So we're just going to have our handle click function here, which is going to increment count. And in our button, we're going to change the text for the button. Why have I done that? Doubled count, I don't know. In our p tag here, we're going to display the count, but we're also saying the doubled value is the reactive doubled value. So anytime count changes, doubled will change with whatever's been assigned to it at that time. So, are you thinking, what's this? Okay, that $colon is actually valid JavaScript. So the Svelte core team decided to co-opt this and use it for the reactivity in Svelte. It is valid JavaScript. You can go to this URL here to find out about labels. And it's just a way to control code flow. So I'm an old VBA developer. I did VBA for well over 10 years in the financial sector, and we used to use labels a lot. So this was familiar to me. But it's not very well known in the JavaScript sort of ecosystem, let's say. So the Svelte core team decided to co-opt that and use that for reactive variables. So are there any gotchas with doing this? There are. So if you're using mutation, any mutation function, this, if you're going to push this onto the numbers array here, this isn't going to come out, this isn't going to be in our reactive variable here. Instead, we need to use assignment. Have I just skipped over 2 slides? I did, didn't I? Okay, sorry. Yeah, instead we're going to need to use assignment. So we're going to use the year 6 operator here, spread numbers back into itself, and then increment the numbers here. So it's a very small cognitive overhead you need to deal with when you want to do anything reactive in Svelte. So let's talk about logic. We've got rendering logic in Svelte. We have if, else, each, and await blocks. You might have seen they were in the curly boys, and the way you opened up a logic block was with a hash. The way you ended it was with a closing tag. And if you wanted to do anything else, like continue after your initial logic operation, you could use the colon. We'll take a look at that now. So with an if statement, in the left-hand side here, we're only going to display one or the other of the buttons. Either way, they'll get rendered. Is that right? No, that isn't right. So on the left-hand side, both the buttons will get rendered. On the left-hand side, we'll only render either button if the user's logged in or not. So we could use the if there, but we've got 2 separate if blocks. We could also just change that to an if else. So we've got the same block, but we're just using the continuation for the else here. And then we are going along with the rest of the button we want to render out here. Okay, each. So each is what everyone uses all the time, I guess, when you're rendering out lists. So web development is just rendering out lists of stuff on the screen. So the each, we have our array of speakers here. The each block will loop over array or array-like items. So we're having each speaker in the speakers array here in a list item, and we're just rendering out the speaker handle, which is defined in our speakers array. Sorry, the the comma I, is just, we can increment over it. We could also use like a keyed each block where you'd have brackets rather than speaker, and we'd say speaker name, just to have it as a unique item in that list. But for the size of this example, it doesn't matter. So await. If you have some code you want to run on the client in a promise, you can await this information here. So the async function here. Oh man, this looks terrible. I'm so sorry. I should have made it a lot bigger. We've got the async function here, which we're going to put into as a promise. And on the button click, we're going to have that assigned to our promise variable. And then we're going to wait for that to resolve. While we're awaiting that to be resolved, we're just going to render out a p tag to say waiting, working. When it gets resolved, we're just going to assign it to a variable, in this case number, and then we're going to render that out to the user. Or we're going to catch an error and say something went wrong, sorry. And I do apologize for the font size. Okay, so we've gone over the primer for Svelte. Let's talk about SvelteKit. So, SvelteKit offers a really powerful router. Server-side and client-side support. Client-side, they're both by default. They're both configurable via variables in the config files in SvelteKit. You get page preloading, which is pretty much what the whole talk is based around. And we get hot module reloading thanks to Whagt. And yes, I pronounce it Whagt. So SvelteKit is to Svelte as what Next.js is to React and Nuxt is to Vue. It's a meta framework built on top of, it's a framework built on top of a framework, a meta framework. Okay, understanding the magic behind data loading. But first, I want to talk about the curse of knowledge. So I did a workshop at the end of March for City.js actually, and there was quite a lot I had to pack in there. And in there, I talked about data loading for getting information from a third-party API and loading it into your page. So the curse of knowledge is you have this unconscious bias where you just assume what you're saying to people is, you know, a gospel. They understand what you're saying. It's pretty much the reason for this talk. So I'm just trying to sort of, what's the word for it? Re-honor myself. What's the word? I can't think of it. Anyway, before we talk about data, getting data into a SvelteKit file, I need to talk about routing in SvelteKit. So there was a time in, oh man, this screen. There was a time in, that none of this is updated. I added so many slides in. Okay. Around August last year, you could just have, rather than this plus page notation here, you could just say, this is the index page, .svelte. In your routes folder, that would be your home page. You could go to an about page, and rather than have this folder, you could just have about.svelte. In August, they changed that. And they took away a lot of how data was processed in a Svelte file, for the better, if you're asking me. A lot of people got mad about it. Most people do when things change. But I really liked it. And I really enjoyed refactoring my 50-odd projects I had in SvelteKit at the time. So this is how you would have a page. So we have this plus page notation. There's other plus files. There's a page.ts file, page.server. There's a few. These are all special files we need to use in SvelteKit. Here's a brief synopsis of what each of them do. If you want to get more information on that, just check out my blog. This section was taken from there, and yeah, it's a very long post on data loading in Svelte. So hopefully I can direct you to that after here, and you can get a lot more information on that. Anyway, component props. So this is leading into the curse of knowledge. So I have my greeting.svelte component here. It's taken in a prop called name. Now, I'm guessing if everyone here is React people, you're wondering why it's saying export let. So in the Svelte tutorial, SvelteKit tutorial as well, export let, you're just said to roll with this information. It'll become second nature. But when I first saw this, I was like, oh my God, what? What is it doing here? This is just how you define props. So this is to say into this greeting.svelte file, it's going to accept a prop called name. And it's going to render out this p tag with the name in there. So we'd use that by importing that file. $lib is just an alias, which I'm pretty sure you've seen in frameworks like Next.js. And we're just passing in our prop here for the name of that component. So should we get on to understanding the magic behind data loading? I want to give you these primers on understanding how the data moves between pages in a SvelteKit project. So I'm really sort of trying to hammer home the use of props and how they work in files. So I guess I need to come into some demo time now and talk about some other features as well, which I've sort of glossed over, but I'm hoping I can demo these as well. And yes, I'm a Windows user, but I'm essentially a Linux user because I use WSL in Windows. I'm pretty sure it's data loading. And if we go to here, open up VS Code, and I'm going to need to bump up the font size. Is that good? Everyone can say that? Okay. So let's go over the anatomy of a basic Svelte project. So we've got Whagt in here. Whagt uses the SvelteKit config. You can add in additional plugins here. There's some really good ones for if you have like code gen for, let's say, a graphical endpoint and you change your schema, you want that to be generated, you can add it in here as a plugin. This is a TypeScript project, so we're using tsconfig. This project also uses Tailwind. In the Svelte config file here, we can define lots of stuff. At the moment, we've just got post pre-process here for Tailwind, and we've got the Whagt pre-process for, oh my God, stop it. I won't try to highlight it. And then there's also additional SvelteKit features here you can add in. This was literally me just scaffolding this out from npm create Svelte, and then just added in the additional parts here. I use Renovate, so that's on GitHub. Post CSS is for Tailwind. The rest of the stuff's just configuration files. The main part of the project, for any SvelteKit project, is going to be in the source folder here. The app directory, sorry, the app.html, this is where the whole project gets rendered into. So this is like the React app, like the top of the tree. And this gets rendered into the SvelteKit body here. And you'll also notice that there is a Svelte head option here as well. So there's a Svelte head API where you can add in additional information you want for your SvelteKit project. Let's go back to the Explorer here. So I've got Tailwind CSS styles and I've got my roots. So you did see in the example slides, I put in an about file. So let's just try and do this now. So about, and I'm going to have page.ts file, and I'm also going to need a page.svelte file plus page.svelte. Okay, so I haven't actually spoken about the relationship between these plus page files. So plus page.ts file will go off, get your data for your Svelte page and load it in before the UI renders for the page. So for our Svelte page here, actually, let's run this. and open up the browser, I guess. And take this out of full screen mode and go to the About page. Okay, so I've just got an empty page at the moment. Let's try. Can I split screen here? Yes. Okay. Yes. Let's make that a bit. Okay. About page. Okay, so this is rendering in real time because when I first started using SvelteKit, I was so blown away by the speed of Whagt with it. I decided to use this autosave. So I use this all the time. So I've got like, anytime I'm making any changes, it just happens real time. That's by the by. So for the About page, let's say I want to render some information from this page.ts file. So in Svelte, you have a load function, and this will, not that, thank you Copilot. This will load any information you need to have before the page loads. I'm just going to return a object here with a title of, let's just say about, for the sake of me trying to type stuff out. So how we get this information into our About page is we have the data prop. So if I have, I'm just going to use TS, JavaScript, and this is going to accept the data for that page. So I can render this out in a pre-tag for now, pre-JSON, and let's just get data. And then wonder why this isn't updating. Okay. So my editor's a bit behind on what's actually happening. So this is just going to render out the JSON for that file. So, you know, what I could actually do here is just have this as a p tag, p tag, and then in here just have the data dot, what was it? Title. Just to render out that information. So this also works with server-side information. So at the moment, if I have my page.ts file here and put in a console log and say, yeah, About page is loaded, whatever, that'll be fine. And we go to the terminal here. You can see that I get the About page loaded in the terminal, but also in the console for the client. Say I didn't want information loaded on the client. Say I was getting information from a server where I was using an API key to get that information. I don't want to do that on the client. So what I would do is use a page.server.ts file instead. And I'm going to, rather than type this stuff out, I'm just going to show you it. In the example I've got here, what did I just do there? Okay, let's go back to the Explorer panel. Let's get rid of that. Where's my delete key? There it is. About, no, it's gone. Yep, okay. Let's go back on over to here and make this a bit bigger and go back to the home page. So in this example, it's a totally contrived example because I'm getting Bitcoin currency information and the information from the Rick and Morty API. So there's a mix of data in here. The reason I did it is because I like Rick and Morty, and that was on a GraphQL server. The coin stuff, I've just used this for forever. So I just know it's a reliable endpoint I can go and get REST information from. So if we dig into this, at the moment, if I go into coins here and get an internal error, that's fine. Why is that? Failed to load URL. Does the file exist? I'm pretty sure it does. Did I delete it? It's there. Oh. Okay, because this is my demo laptop, I haven't actually got the environment variables in here. So this is trying to get a public token which doesn't exist. Let's create that file now. .env, and then I want a public token. Let's just copy that. And I've also got a private token somewhere. So let's just put this in as, this is a public token. And save that. And I know I've got some server-side information in here as well. Let's go and get this secret token. We'll come on to that shortly. But let's just put that in here. Okay. Thank you, Copilot. Thank you, thank you. Okay, so this should now work. And it's not working. Okay. Thank you, demo gods. Thank you, thank you. Let's just try and install these dependencies. Okay. It should work. Undefined. That's not good. Well, this is going to turn into me debugging a project. I'm sorry, everyone. Why isn't this working? Oh, because I put the env file in totally wrong place. Well done, Scott. Right, there we go. Thank you. So, oh, yeah, I thought I was getting a round of applause. Thank you so much. Oh, the stress. Right. So, where was I? Okay, nervous laughter. So, in this page here, we're just taking, oh, I'm sweating. We're just bringing in this data prop, which comes from page.ts file. So this is the public token. So at the moment, if I go to the server, I've got it being rendered out as this is a public token, and also in the console here, this is public. So that's fine. I just clicked on that. I shouldn't have done that. This is great and all if you've just got like an open endpoint you want to hit and get the information from. But say you have secret information you don't want to be exposed, you can use the page.server.ts file. So this means it's only going to run on the server. And just doing the same thing here, just using the secret token, logging this out so you can all see it. And I'm getting the API information from the endpoint. And I'm just returning the data as currencies in this fetch coins function. So I'm going to come on to, how are we doing for time, by the way? I mean, I could talk forever about it, so. Can we do like 5 minutes? Okay, cool. Thank you. We've got a target. Right. So yeah, this information here in the coins server side, which is this one, we're not going to get the token logged out here, but it is going to be logged out in our server here. So that's how you'd not have sensitive information logged on your client. One thing I also want to talk about as well is we'll quickly go over the, oh, I haven't got Edge open. Let's open Edge. Go away and copy this in here. Because I want to talk about data loading. So we've got parallel and we've got waterfall. So you can load your data consecutively, which is what I'm doing in this waterfall example here. If we go to the page.ts file, I'm going off and getting the Rick and Morty characters, and I'm returning that along with the, I skipped straight past it, the coin law data here. And I'm just bundling this into a return statement here. So this is going to cause a waterfall. So if I go to the network tab, I don't use Edge very much. So if I go over the waterfall here, and then we look at the output, which I'm going to need to make a lot bigger for everyone to see. Maybe not that big. Okay, so you can see that we've got the ticket information first in the waterfall. God. and then the GraphQL information afterwards. So how you would get around that is you would run both of the promises in the return statement, which I'm doing in this parallel run here, in this page.ts file. So these are wrapped in their own functions, here and here. And then I'm calling them in the return function here. And then these should, Wappalizer, go away. Let's just clear this out. Maybe try a hard refresh actually. That one. Just to make sure I've not fetched any additional information. And then we go to the parallel. You can see that these two are retrieved at the same time. And sorry about the IntelliSense there. So that's how you do it for if you've got a lot of data you want to get all at the same time, you can do it in parallel. One last thing I want to talk about is the data loading in SvelteKit. So you might have noticed when I hovered over that, it started loading the information straight away. Let's just close them and close up that. Go over to the app.html file here. There's HTML properties you can add in. So it will go off with this data SvelteKit preload data if there is a page where there is a link and it has a corresponding load function for that page. On hover, it will go off and run that data before you click on the link. So I just want to demonstrate that now. So if I go to coins here and hover over this, you can see that it's gone off and got the ticket information for that endpoint. So that relates to the source, roots, coins, this page.ts function. So it's gone off and run that function before I've even clicked on it. So I can click on this now and then I'll get the data instantaneously. And I think because that property is at the top level of the project, anything which is hovered on after that, it will go off and get that information. So you can see I'm hovering over these bits here. It's going off and getting information before I click on it. So if I go to Bitcoin, this should load instantaneously or very quickly. And this is also configurable as well. So say if you don't want to have all this information retrieved and loaded on hover, you could configure it. You could remove that configuration at the top app level here, and you could just have it individually on the individual links you want to load. But I find just having it at the top level is great, but you can also control it on a per link basis. So in your anchor tag here, let's go to where this is, which would be in somewhere, coins, page.svelte, in this anchor tag here. We could just put in the data SvelteKit preload, and you could have it on tap or on hover or just disable it entirely. Or you could also have it on page reload. So I'm hoping that I've given you a good understanding of how data moves through a SvelteKit project. And we haven't even touched on forms, but forms is the same sort of thing. Client data goes to the server does all your processing, passes it back to the client, and you would have export let form rather than export let data, and you can get any information related to that form. So I'm hoping I have redeemed myself from my workshop back in March and explained it fully for people to hopefully understand it better.
Hi, thanks. Nice talk. I have, I guess, a marketing question. So imagine you work for big enterprise. Many people are very opinionated. Everyone suggesting their own ideas, and no one wants to agree on anything. What would be the sales pitch to suggest this over anything else?
Oh man, I should have. I could have done my sales pitch talk for Svelte actually.
Like punchline.
Smaller, faster, better. All right. Smaller, faster, better. I mean, because it's a compiler, you're only shipping the minimum subset of the features you need to be shipped. So if you don't have any animations, there's no animations being shipped to the browser. So because it compiles up front and then ships that to the browser. If you don't have any animations, you don't have any routing, none of that gets put into the bundle. Sorry, not a bundle. None of that gets put into what gets sent to the browser. So it's only the minimum subset of what's needed. Svelte is actually used on point-of-sale systems in South American countries where they have like a POS, and what it can actually run is it's very limited on the space it can use. So they do use it in systems like that. So it's very small and compact and fast. So you're not shipping like, I don't want to point fingers, but you're not shipping a whole bundle of JavaScript with everything in it you need. It's just exactly what is needed for that project.
Since we are discussing about performance, if I don't use it in server-side rendering, do you know if it also does code splitting as I will get from React?
I didn't mention code splitting, but it does do code splitting out of the box. I've not got too deep into having to configure it myself. I found from my use cases, so I've done e-commerce apps. I mean, that's the main thing which anyone's really interested about. E-commerce, I've done loads of other smaller apps as well, and I've never needed to get into a position where I need to specify what I need to split out from, what needs to be rendered in what time. So yeah.
And in terms of performance, you will reckon that it always wins against React, no matter.
No, I didn't say that.
Okay. I was expecting. So, what use cases do you think are most? Yeah.
But it is fast because it's the holy trinity of the web. You're just shipping ESM modules, which is what Vite exports for you, HTML and CSS. So it's as fast as that allows you to be. There's no virtual DOM diffing involved. So if you've got big lists of stuff, you don't need to keep track of what happens. It does all that on the client for you.
Okay, makes sense.